Hello and welcome to TransForm Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm joined today by Sarah Mitchell in charge of our documentation department. Today we're going to be doing a small session. Let me go ahead and share my screen though, because I don't think, I got to make myself the presenter. Hang on a moment. It's like I've never done this before. Okay, presenter, here we go. Make presenter. And I'm going to show my screen. Okay, today we're going to be going over basically a question that someone had asked about the permissions tab, which I know is a confusing tab for a lot of you. You probably don't spend a lot of time there. And it's been a little while since we've covered it, so I thought I'd go over it today. I'm going to go over an example today with permissions in which we have forms that are assigned just to certain people. So some people can see them and some people can't. But then we're going to go into another use case, and I think Sarah might help me out with this one, in which we archive an old form type. So we don't make the form data or anything disappear, but we set it aside so that it's not in the way of users. Maybe we've come up with a new edition of the form, or maybe a particular user is no longer using the form and we don't want to clutter up their workspace. So let's get started. So a while ago, I'm looking through my notes here. Let me see, here we go, 57. I had come up with an example in which there were two different form types. One was for keeping track of buildings, one was for keeping track of appliances. And if you can imagine, although this is kind of a really forced example, that you have one administrator who's in charge of both of these things and wants to make sure that the people who are looking at the building stuff only see building stuff, and the people who look at the appliance stuff only look at the appliance stuff. And so to do that, we went into the permissions tab and I sort of walked you through here. Today, I want to go a little bit more in depth and sort of explain it in a larger view, screen by screen, just so that everyone knows what's going on. Okay, so here we are in the permissions tab. And let's imagine, actually, let's start back one. Let's actually create a form first. Take it right from the very beginning. We'll let that load. And I'm going to create a new one, a blank one, and I'm going to call it permissions 2. And we'll call this permissions 2. All right, and let's just make this really simple. Name, one field. Can't get easier than that. Save that. Click to save changes. Okay, so I've created a single form called permissions, has a single field on it. And now I'm going to go into the permissions tab. And we'll take a look here. Now, when you open up the tab on your account, if you've never made any permissions changes, chances are you're only going to see these 4 things up in here in status: open, submitted, approval, and closed. That refers to a meta field that's stored on with the record, which can indicate that something is closed. You might be familiar with placing a button, like a submit button on a form, that automatically changes the status. And we allowed for multiple statuses because we thought there might be times in which maybe something needs to be reviewed or something needs to be checked over, or you may have different parts of a workflow. So just simply having open and closed we thought was too limiting. So in fact, besides the 4 that it comes with, you can add new ones. Here's one called needs review. That was a new type of status. So that's the status section over here. Now roles, on the other hand, are a little bit more intricate or something. I don't know if that's quite the right word, but right off the top you get a bunch of roles here, these 5 roles, and you'll notice that they're the same ones that you see when you set up user permissions back here on the Home tab. So if I'm in the Home tab and I want to manage my user roles, I believe this account only has 2 people in it. Yeah, it's got Dave and, well, another Dave. And you'll see that the roles that have been assigned to me here are user, account administrator, form designer, management console, and so on. So these allow me to do different things. It allows me to create new forms, look at the data, delete forms, and do all kinds of things. Meanwhile, this other user here is just a trainee. So the trainee has got different things. He doesn't have all of the same permissions over here. So what permissions does the trainee actually have? Well, let me show you. If we pop over to the permissions tab, all we have to do is we click on, well, this is how I created a new trainee. I created this one, by the way, just by hitting this plus button. So when I go over here, I can take a look and say, all right, so here are some groups. Let me make sure I've deleted my leftover stuff. It looks like I have. Great. And I'm going to create a new group called the training group. So I can hit plus. Oops. Did it appear down here? Plus.
It always appears at the bottom.
It does. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, this is this one I don't know. Well, let's just edit this one then for now. And so we're going to set this new group to we're going to call this the training group. And similar to a form, it has an internal name and an external name, but I'm going to give them both the same name, training group. And then I can set this and save changes. And so let's take a look at the training group that I just set up. Right now, if you were to set a form to a training group, no one would be allowed to do anything with it. But so what we want to do is we want to start going through this section here and start making some decisions about what happens when forms are marked as training group. So first of all, let's decide who's allowed to create new forms of this type. I'm going to say maybe trainees are allowed to, and account administrators, and maybe form designers. Okay, and who's allowed to browse this form type? Browsing the form type means that when you, on your phone, when you click that add a new form, will it appear in the list of forms that you can add? And we want to allow the trainees to do that, and probably an account administrator. I tend to allow account administrators to do everything, but that's up to you. All right, great. So now take a look here. We've got some statuses that match over here to the status thing. So now if a form has been marked as submitted already, then who is allowed to, what are they allowed to do with that? Well, let's say if a form is marked as submitted, you are allowed to, oh, there should be a combination of, you should be allowed to list it, edit it, delete it, and so on as a basic user. Now as a trainee, actually I don't want to do that for a user. I want to go back down here. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. I'm going to go down here to trainee and say if a form has already been submitted, actually let's not let the trainee do anything for a form that's been submitted. Let's find for a form that's just open, like when you first create it, then that trainee should be allowed on the form filler, the mobile app, to list that, edit it, maybe even delete it, and maybe even change its status to submitted. But once it's submitted, we want the trainee to not be able to do anything. So maybe that we'll just leave it right here. Now over here in this section, we have management console. I was just explaining form filler, that's the mobile app, but management console is this TransForm central section, and specifically the management console tab. Let's say that we wanted, after a form was submitted, we wanted to allow the trainee to go and take a look at that form. So we'd go under the submitted type forms, choose trainee, and show them that they're allowed to list it, maybe not edit it or delete it, and maybe they're allowed to change the status. No, I don't think we should allow them to change the status, so we'll leave these boxes blank. All right, so that's part of what we needed to do in order to set this up. Now that we've created a new combined group status role permission list called training group, and we have assigned and we've set it up so that people who are marked as trainee status back on the home screen are allowed to open and do a couple things with those forms. Now what we need to do is actually specify a particular form that they're allowed to use. And as you saw just a moment ago, we created one. So let's go and use that one. But first I'm going to click here to save changes. When you move off of this tab, always make sure that if there's an orange thing here, to make sure you click on it to save what you're doing. Now we're going to go back to the designer. Here's the permissions to form that I created. And here's the, let me show you that setting again. When I click on this here in the form types list and I go into properties, I can scroll down until I get to this box here, status role permissions group. And so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose training because that's the name of the group that we just created. Save that. That's really all I need to do to get that set up. And I just click Save Changes again. All right, so now you've seen how to restrict a form to a particular set of status role permissions, and how to set up a person so that they are matching up that role, and what the permissions are for that particular role and that particular form as it relates to statuses. So I've explained that again. Hopefully that makes sense, but I do know that it can be a bit to wrap your head around, and you might want to look at it another time or review this video next time you need to go set up permissions. But what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to hand it over to Sarah, who can show an example of how to archive a form. So imagine that you have users who've been using a form for a while, but now you kind of want to take that form away from them, but you don't want to delete that form. So Sarah, are you there? And can you show us how to do that?
I am here. Give me a sec here.
Sure.
Need to revalidate my login.
Oh, yep.
And I got it right on the first try.
Fantastic.
Nothing will go wrong. All right.
Nothing will go wrong. Exactly. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. Oh, there you are.
Okay. I have two screens.
And I'm looking at a blank blue one right now.
Blank blue one? Can you see that?
Now I see your alpha transform screen. Yep.
There we go. All right. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about deleting forms for a moment. When you delete a form type, it doesn't delete the form instances. And unless you've gone through and either removed all those form instances or marked them as don't download or closed, or given them some status that prevents them from being downloaded to the app for the user that they were assigned to, what can happen is that those instances will still be on the user's device, but you can't access them because there's no form type to view them with. So one way you can handle that is by archiving forms. And the easiest way to do that is by using permissions and changing the permission group for the specific form types you want to remove to that new permission group. And I have a lot of forms that I've deleted using this method. And so, for example, I have this, it's called bad form because it was malformed and not behaving properly. But I didn't want to lose that for running through our beta test stuff before we send new things out. So I created this new permission set called archive forms. And it's a really simple group. All it has is it has roles for the management console specifically, so that if you have access to the management console role, then you can look at those form types and change their statuses or even access that old data. You might not have that form in circulation anymore, but you may want to view it. So this is what I did. I created this archive form type. I assigned only the management console settings to the open, submitted, approval, closed, and this archived status, which I use for a different reason in other cases. But I found this approach was really nice because it removes these forms from access for my users, but I can still go into the management console and pull up those old form types and look at the data that was in them. So it's the best of both worlds. You can still access the data if you need it, and you prevent those forms from being downloaded to the user's device and thus prevent people from creating new ones because you don't want them to use it anymore. I'll pull this one up. So that's how I've used the permissions here for archiving. And it's pretty simple. If you have an existing form and you want to archive it, you just come in here, you pick your new status group, and then that, once you save it, will immediately make it inaccessible for people in the field.
Now, to make your life easier, when you do that, it looked like you also changed the display name to have the word deleted form in the beginning of it, so you knew.
I did on these ones. Yeah, I did on these ones because unfortunately I had deleted them before I created my archived form approach, so I had to come back in here and figure out what they were, and I just gave them all the same name for these cases. But I think originally, like, these ones were called like Gemba Walk and Welcome to TPL.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
imagine it would be helpful anyway if you are going to archive a form to maybe change its name a little bit, the display name, and
Yeah.
put archive next to it or something like that, so
That
it's
is
it's
something you
not quite the
can do.
same as someone
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So like for me, it was helpful to write just deleted form in here so I knew that I have removed these. I don't want to use them anymore. Um, I think I think this sorts alphabetically by form display name. So if you wanted to name these so they were not showing up, I think this might work.
You could be like
You could
Z or
prefix
something.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that will shift them down to the bottom of the list, so then you wouldn't necessarily see them up here anymore if you wanted to
Cool.
make sure those were out of the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions on this? I think I don't see any questions at all, which makes me think we probably confuse people, but, or maybe they know what's going on. But if we do, go ahead and type them into the questions box. While you're doing that, I want to talk a little bit about the next session I'd like to do for Transform Tuesday, which is going to be building an invoice based on the invoice form that I showed you last week. So I'll show you how to create a report that takes that invoice data and formats it into a nice report that can be emailed or displayed on screen. That's it. So it doesn't look like any questions. Terrific. Thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you at next Transform Tuesday. Thank you very much, Sarah, also for standing by and pointing out part of the demo.
You're
Again,
welcome.
if you do have questions, go ahead and send them to tfservice@alphasoftware.com and we'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks again. Goodbye and stay well.